Hi, I'm Dawn Montefusco, life coach for writers and creatives, and this is Write Your True Story, how to use your story to grow your business, inspire millions, and leave a legacy. And today I have a woman who I recently met and thoroughly adore, Lindsay Shearer. She's an online marketing and traffic strategist and podcaster who gets over 40,000 visitors to her website per month. She's a merger and acquisitions specialist turned entrepreneur and online marketing addict. Lindsay is passionate about helping entrepreneurs start online businesses, write books, grow their traffic with Pinterest, generate more leads on autopilot, and automate their traffic generation. She's created a powerful community of entrepreneurs who are creating powerful online businesses and a significant positive impact in the world. All of her strategies are direct and actionable to make online marketing frustration-free and fun. She's also the author of the best-selling Amplified Ambition, 10 Keys to the Marketplace Kingdom, Uncover and Monetize Your Destiny, Skyrocket Your True Motivation, and Amplify Your Impact in the World. I love reading that.
Yeah, I was going to say, you make me sound so amazing.
You are, Lindsay. It's so great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for all the wonderful things you're doing and to have a cool conversation with you about writing your best story, your most authentic story. I can't wait.
Well, before we get started, tell everybody, a little about what you do and any projects you're working on right now.
Yeah, so my heart is really to see the kingdom just set on fire in the online business world. As we all know, things are moving more online. People are creating courses online. There's e-commerce is really becoming the heart of the way we do business strategy. And so I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be dominating that field as Christians in the industry. So a few years ago, one of my mentors was like, doing all these online marketing programs and things like that. And I just really got addicted. Like you, I was in the health and wellness industry before. And once I started getting exposed to the online marketing world, I just really became ravenous. There was just not enough information for me to learn. And I love change and I love new, interesting techniques. So online marketing was just like the perfect fit.
Yeah.
So I started diving in and learning about search engine optimization, learning about branding and what it takes to really create highly converting funnels online. And so now that's what I'm working on. I have two podcasts, one that's called Kingdom Amplified. It's more from the biblical centered online entrepreneur side, and then one that's called Marketing Funnel Breakdown, that it's all about just what your marketing funnels, what works, what doesn't work, and why, getting the skills, tools, and resources. And then I've combined all that information into an online community that I'm creating. I'm super excited about. It's called Kingdom Amplified Connect. Yeah, it's going to be a place where you can go and get tools and resources, get encouragement, get prayer, get biblical teaching, get online business teaching. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. So we're looking at a launch here in the next probably month and a half, probably 6 weeks or so.
Cool. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, I'm super excited. And just meeting super amazing people like yourself, Dawn, all across the world who are just doing amazing things. It's the most encouraging and exciting thing. And seeing and hearing people actually writing their true, authentic stories, that just really sets my heart on fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Authenticity is like, you're so you. You're so you, and it works because of that.
Exactly. And people are drawn to you, they're connected to you. And when you break down that wall that is so easy to set up in between people when you're not vulnerable or you're afraid to share your true story, it's so much more freeing when that comes down and you can just be who you really are and you don't have to wear a mask or
Well, tell the audience a little bit more, because of people who get scared.
Yeah.
How has authentic and vulnerable truth-telling and storytelling helped you to attract more clients?
Well, being in the online business world for the past 12 years or so, when I first started out, I was younger. I was a little bit less emotionally intelligent, I guess you could say, less maybe mature in my process of authenticity. And so I kind of developed and built an entire strategy, and I was still trying to find myself and not really sure what my voice was. And I was not as successful in any way because I kept trying to fit myself into what other people look like or other people's strategy. And I finally had a couple of coaches along the way who were like, what do you want to do? Who are you? Are you proud of your unique gift in the kingdom? And like, if you had the cure for cancer, wouldn't you go out into the world and like just tell everybody? And so they challenged me that your gift that you are carrying is something that's so special and so powerful and so important. Are you willing to go to that level of vulnerability and authenticity and just sharing, hey, I have the cure for spiritual cancer?
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So once I got framed in those terms for me, I was like, okay, I have such a responsibility for the gifts that I'm carrying to share with anyone and everyone who wants to build an online business or write a book. Over the course of writing my book, I realized, you know what, there are so many people that were asking me, how did you do the process? What was it like to publish? How did you write it so quickly? And so I just designed a course. I was like, here, this is my entire modules of write, publish, market your book to best-selling author in 30 days. So the cool thing is, for you guys that are listening, I'm going to give you a free masterclass so you can kind of get the downloads. Yeah. So you can see, okay, what does it look like? What is kind of the outline of how this works and where do I need to get started?
Yes. I love it.
Yeah. It's so fun and so exciting.
You mentioned something before we jumped on and I was like, wait, let's save it. But, the enemy wants us to have guilt and be isolated or feel guilt and isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us more for people who really are scared and they don't know why they're scared of sharing their truth, their authenticity, and they get to that point and they go, ah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because the enemy, last night I was actually at a prayer meeting and the guy was talking about how the enemy doesn't come up with any new tactics. He's always using fear, intimidation, and accusation on us, right? So his goal is always to block us away from isolation because God created us to be in community. He created us to be sharing our stories and the power of the testimony. There are so many verses in scripture about how the most powerful thing is the power of your testimony.
Yes.
So I realized that along in my process of writing the book and just having great mentorship, which I cannot speak highly enough of having amazing mentorship. Any goals and coaches, any goals that you have in your life, I don't know how I would have ever done anything without coaching. That's a side note.
I agree with you 100%. And all good coaches can say that because we're teaching what we know.
Exactly.
And so, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's so good. So the enemy always wants, his goal is always to like get us not going to church, get us not plugged in, get us staying home and feeling sorry for ourselves that we're not living in our fullest destiny or living out our purpose or feeling a sense of fullness and just getting us isolated. And so I would say that too about writing your book or sharing your authentic story is the more you can be open with it, the more freedom it's going to bring to the people that you listen to. Or the people that are listening to you. And that's something, I mean, I've been through everything you can think of. Whenever you read my book, you'll see, I mean, it's just like crazy things have happened to me, like divorce and starting multi-million-dollar businesses and losing it all and just crazy financial, family, just anything that you can think of, which is cool because I feel like it's given me a place of authority in these areas that I would have never realized before. And I chose not to go into that place of depression and isolation. I mean, of course, you go through divorce and crazy things. Yeah, you have your moments.
For sure.
But choosing to be authentic with my story, choosing to share my true feelings, not only with people around me, but just being really real with God. And just like having words with him and just having it out with him. Like, Lord, I don't understand. And I'm mad. And, all these things. There's so much more freedom in that than there is in trying to be a perfect Christian or speaking Christianese to your friends or, just trying to be this ideal, really old covenant, legalistic, religious spirit version of yourself. It's like, dude, no, God is so free. It's all about relationship. He wants you to be in community with him. He wants you to be in community with the people around you.
And
And
he wants you to be you. That's what's
exactly.
is that, I've done some course. I go back to Course in Miracles, and I go back to scripture in different ways. And then I'm amazed at when I meet people like you, or I surround myself. That's another thing. I surround myself with people that know that I'm going to be okay, that know I need to be lifted up, that know. So it's not just God, like the prayer that actually, when it say, what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say, and to whom? You know what I mean? Like, just guide me. And I say, just ask for guidance. People think that what I think is great is some of my clients are like, and friends are like, well, I don't know what to ask. I'm like, that's not your job. Your job is just to say, hey, I need guidance, I need clarity. But the beauty of it is, I think the guidance and the clarity is more and more and more and more to be yourself.
Exactly.
It's kind of wacky when you think about it from the old school way.
Yeah. And just checking in with God and having a relationship with him like you would your best friend, It doesn't have to be this crazy formal. I think even early on in my relationship with God, I always thought there was like some formal way to enter into his presence or something. And it's like, no, he lives inside you.
Yes.
All you have to do is just check in. He's right there to wrap his arms around you and say, he's always talking. The more you start learning that frequency of hearing his voice, it's like, he's always talking.
Yes.
There's always something he wants to say to you.
Totally.
You're his beloved kid. He wants to tell you everything. He wants to be, he's more excited than we are about the things that are happening.
Yes.
So.
And I love that, it's that surrounding yourself and revisiting it yourself, like knowing that it's there and saying, I want to be me. I want to be all of me. I don't know how to be me. I don't know where to put me. And what I love about online too, I'll just say, is that when I was doing research for this project, oh my God, I was researching like 250 different people to pick like 25.
Yeah.
And I was like, my goodness gracious, I've been living in an insular world. We still just, do what we know. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, look at all these amazing people doing so many amazing things. So I think when it comes down to authenticity and vulnerability, at least I'm seeing that in the online market, there's a lot of people realizing that they can't, the BS monitor, people can see through. So being real is actually the best way to grow a business.
Yeah. Well, we are growing up. The new generations that are coming forward are all about authenticity. They don't really want anything to do with millennials and lower and things like that. They don't want anything to do with the non or the facades or anything like that. And I think people in general can recognize it so quickly. It's like, if you're not, and sometimes I think we're not even aware of it. You have to really be dedicated to doing the personal work.
Yeah, agreed.
Like being very much on the track of personal growth and listening to sermons and just being very present with your own process. And that's what is the vulnerable part though, right? It's like, no one's perfect. So being really present with where you are and being honest about it and saying, hey, I don't have to be this perfect anything. I just am who I am. And this is where I am now. And I just loving well and receiving love well. And that's it. That's how the kingdom grows.
Yeah. It's phenomenal. I love this whole idea of just what you said before, like, when you start to realize you have gifts to give, and it's sort of your job, like to present that to the world and help other people. I mean, the whole thing really is service.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little too about how being authentic and vulnerable is being in service to others? So it's not, because some people I think that like, oh, I don't want it to be all about me, or I don't want the spotlight on me or something. But in essence, by sharing that depth or that level is a service.
Yeah. Well, think about it even like in my own life and the stories that my mentors have shared with me, and watching people walk through different struggles and being very open and honest about it has given me so much more freedom and tools. And sometimes I think that there's this view in the church sometimes of like, oh, hide it, or don't, that's bad and nobody should know about it. When in all actuality, I feel like a lot of the best preachers, a lot of the most interesting people that I actually connect to have been through really gnarly things, right?
Yes,
and they're they're honest about it. Like even David Hogan this week, I'm not sure if you're familiar with his ministry. So he's, their ministry, they've raised like 600 people from the dead. I mean, it's just like a crazy signs and wonders. And he's all in the jungles, like fighting gang violence in Mexico. And he's like this 66-year-old man, like just going for it. And he's like, listen, I was a gangster. I grew up in the middle of, gang life.
Yeah.
And now the Lord radically saved me out of it. And I'm going back into that world and giving that gift of freedom.
Yeah.
And pulling people out of the trenches. And I feel like that is what our true story does.
Mm-hmm.
It gives
great analogy.
Yeah, real freedom, right? We're sharing the tools and real freedom, and the words that we speak have so much power, and it releases people into their destiny. Mm-hmm. Just even saying truth and speaking truth in love, it's so much freedom.
Totally. It really is. It's the weight comes off of you.
Exactly.
I think it's like the counterintuitive thing. People like, oh, if I tell people my real story, somehow they're holding onto some energy, but I feel like the weight comes off of you.
Yeah. Well, there's so much fear around, there's a lot of men that struggle with pornography. There are a lot of people who have unhealthy relationships just because of not healthy communication and being afraid to be vulnerable and authentic. And it's like, that's what the enemy tries to get in. Like I was saying about that isolation and that fear of communicating, because there's a guilt and a shame associated with it. But that's not from God. God is not, he's always calling us up into our true identity. Totally. Even like if you think about the disciples who betrayed Jesus and who, they all basically did and ran away by the time it was over with, right? And so Jesus comes back, he sees them on the road, and he doesn't say, oh, hey, you jerks who totally betrayed me, and now I'm, whatever. He's like, hey, my brothers, I love you in relationship. He's never about the condemnation or judgment or guilt or shame that sometimes the religious spirit wants to put on us. Mm-hmm. It's all about calling us up into, hey, you don't necessarily need this because there's freedom for you here in your true prevailing truth self, right? Mm-hmm. The prevailing truth of heaven versus what may be sort of true. Like the enemy will say, oh, in your past, you're an adulterer, for example, or whatever. And it's like, that may be true, but the prevailing truth from heaven is, you are my beloved son in whom I am well pleased.
Yeah.
And you are free from all condemnation, shame, guilt, sin. That's the past. You are a new man. You're a new creation, right? Mm-hmm. So that prevailing truth from heaven, that's got to be the winning voice in our heads.
And that's the story that we really all need to hear over and over and over, right? The way that we've prevailed, the way that we've overcome a struggle. Mm-hmm. And what do you think it is, just in its base form? Like, we're drawn to that hero's journey, that struggle that has been overcome. Like you went through ups and downs, and now you're here. And I mean, and you light me up when I look at your website. I'm like, oh yeah, but what is it about that little bit of struggle, or a lot of struggle? Some people have crazy stories that we're drawn to. So that's why it's okay to talk about. But what is that draw?
So even Jesus grew in authority, right? Mm-hmm. So going through struggles is how you grow in authority. So I had to learn this lesson because I was mad at God. I was like, Lord, I don't understand. I feel like I'm always fighting something. I'm always going uphill, and I really don't understand. And he spoke to me one day and was like, listen, you told me you wanted to grow in authority. Well, I'm allowing these things to happen. God doesn't send us like turbulence or gnarly things, but sometimes he allows it to happen so that we can grow, right? Mm-hmm. He allows us to exercise our spiritual muscles, and he's given us all the tools and all the keys of the kingdom to be able to overcome any circumstance that we come in contact with. Mm-hmm. So keeping that in mind, it's like, okay. And God loves an underdog. I mean, think about Jesus, right? I think about this all the time. It's like Jesus, technically was fatherless in a culture where that was completely unheard of. He was poor. Well, that's maybe debatable. His family had some money. As time progressed, he did have more money, but the vision of him is that he was kind of like, grew up in a time where we didn't have the modern,
just,
exactly.
doing this thing.
Yeah, didn't have the modern luxuries of like indoor plumbing and things like that, right? So it's like, okay, he was against all odds. Most of the cultures were totally right. The Pharisees hated him, like all these religious people and the New Agers at the time and all this stuff. So it's like, okay, I get it, Lord. Like we're growing in that place of peace and knowing that we have to rely on you for peace.
Mm-hmm.
We have to rely on what you're telling us because the world is telling us something totally different.
Mm-hmm.
So we're always going to be in a place. I think that's part of our journey on this earth, is growing in this place of bringing that atmosphere of heaven down to earth, growing in this place of authority to where we don't get offended. Things on the outside are not affecting us the way that it does for someone who doesn't have that internal peace of knowing who they are in Christ. So it's a journey though.
It's crazy. Sometimes I wonder, okay, I have another question.
Sure.
I'm just loving this. Is when the struggle is a perspective, right? So there's actually not that much of the external struggle. And again, this kind of talks to this idea of authenticity, vulnerability, because that's all internal struggle, strife, before you pop out of that and go, oh, you mean this is how I'm going to be able to be closer and bigger, is by sharing these vulnerable, crazy spots. But some days when you say you're praying and you're saying, why am I going uphill? I'm like, why am I thinking I'm going uphill? Like my perception is that I'm going uphill, when in actuality, everything is working out great. And when we hear these stories, Steve Jobs said, we can't connect the dots looking backwards. We can only connect the dots looking forwards. Now, God has that perspective already, right? Like, I got you. I'm connecting your dots. You just don't know. How can what's other than prayer, or I guess the knowledge is power. How do we shift our perspective to, oh, this is part of my story. This is okay.
Yeah, I think that's a couple of things. One is renewing your mind. And that just means you're staying in the word, you're staying in a place of hunger and in a place of, that's what true son and daughtership is in the kingdom, is being able to be adjusted, right? Yeah, being able to take a look at this, not be led by the circumstances, but like, okay, how am I reacting to this? Why am I getting triggered by this? And taking a really deep, authentic look at ourselves and being like, okay, I'm actually, and the Lord will always speak to you about this. Like, okay, I'm actually coming into a weird agreement with something that's really not true with my authentic, who God says I am. It may be who I say I am at the moment, but really we have to look at that, like I said before, that prevailing truth of like, okay, who does the word say that I am?
Yeah.
I am his beloved daughter. I have freedom. I have all these things. So if the fruit that I'm feeling and experiencing right now is not coming into agreement with that, then who needs to make an adjustment? Right?
Totally.
So I think it's just a daily ongoing communication with the Lord, a daily openness, a daily desire to grow and just be present with him and understand that like we have a large purpose, but there are many, many ways to get there. And we have so much freedom as his kids. Like Holy Spirit's always like, yeah, sure. That's awesome. This is a great idea. We can do anything. So staying focused on that the possibilities are endless, that we're not going to be wrong or like bad sinners or whatever if we choose something that's a little bit different than maybe what we thought it was going to look like, but really adjusting our expectations and letting the Lord calibrate our emotions and our expectations.
Yes.
I think that's been a really intense lesson I've had to learn in the last year or so, when God's just really been uprooting some foundational stuff so that I can go out and do more speaking engagements and things like this with you. There's a lot of foundational work that has to be shaken out, because I don't want to perpetuate lies, and I don't want to perpetuate a mindset or a way of thinking that's actually not biblical.
Yep.
Right. And is actually not going to bring freedom. So he has to, especially when you come into that place when you're like, Lord, I'm going to surrender. I want to go into ministry, whatever that looks. I mean, our whole life is ministry, regardless of what we do or say, whatever. So, but knowing and coming into that place of surrender, that's the hardest part, I think, in the Christian journey, is understanding that surrender is actually freedom. It's not, I have to give up everything fun. Sometimes at what we think of. At least I did when I was super resistant forever.
Surrender is a fascinating one because I think it like, regardless of your faith, it goes to that. I mean, as simple as, I mean, if we want, like, I have a great meditation teacher, and he wrote a book called Resurrecting Jesus. So he discusses Buddhism and he discusses Jesus, you know, in tandem, as two different ways of looking at it. Buddha being more the human being, but actually, like, he was the man getting in touch with the mind, and Jesus is the man getting in touch with God and the God's son, versus Buddha, who was not technically, you know, I mean, so looking at it just that way. But what's interesting that you should say that is, in meditation, surrender is everything. Yeah. And in prayer, surrender is everything. You know, and I think in faith, regardless of anything, we have to have faith in ourselves. You know, and that word surrender is so powerful.
Oh man, I think that's the hardest one.
Quick question.
Sure.
With surrender, this is great. I was going to ask, this is so perfect. When is too much vulnerability too much? Or is it a possibility in terms of internet, social media, putting yourself out there? There's lots of talk about how much is too much, how much isn't enough. And I'm just wondering if you have anything, because you're out there in social media and online, to people who are starting.
I think it depends. There is a level of like, first of all, if you haven't dealt with, like, say, for example, you've had something really bad happen to you in your past. If you personally haven't dealt with that on a level with a counselor, and if it triggers you, then it's probably not all the way something that you have either come into full mastery of, or, I mean, so obviously we get triggered by our testimony, but I'm talking about if it brings you outside into an unhealthy place of where you're feeling like not over it, if that makes sense.
Excellent answer. Yeah.
And so I've had to learn that too, because there are things that the Lord's told me, oh, you need to share this part of your life. And I'm like, dude, no, I'm not even like, I'm so not even ready. And then you also have to consider, okay, are there implications for other people involved? Like, especially people who've had like family abuse or things like that. It's like, okay, if you've dealt with these things in your past and you want to share that publicly, and you feel like the Lord is calling you to do that and giving you the freedom to do that, you probably need to have conversation with the people who are involved and prepare them for that. And for me, it's like, there are certain things where I'm like, it's not going to bring honor to the people involved in that situation. I would only share that with someone that I'm in really close relationship with, that I felt like I could trust that information with. And sometimes people break your trust. I get that, whatever. But for me personally, I choose, it's like, okay, there are certain parts of my story that I can be a little bit more willing than I would be on stage to everybody in the world. I don't think that makes me any less authentic. I think it makes me in a place of relationship where those people can really speak into my life in that area.
I love it.
Yeah. And then as I grow and maybe I feel more comfortable, then it's like, okay, yeah, I can share more of my testimony and more of my story, maybe publicly and it's crazy because even one of our pastors, like, she dealt with suicide a lot, suicidal thoughts and feelings as a kid and as a young adult and teenager. And it's funny how she'll get up and talk about that on our platform at church. And I'm like, at first I would have never thought. Not only did I not know, I would have never realized, but it's like, in those days, I had a good friend that was going through this too recently. And it's like, she came up to me afterwards and was like, dude, when our pastor shared that, it totally gave me so much freedom.
Wow.
So I think it's about, and it shocked me. I mean, you don't know. You never know. Sometimes getting to that really deep, vulnerable place is the only thing that's going to help somebody else out of it. And give them the tools and relationships to do it. So I think it's all about communication with the Lord, how you feel about that present circumstance, how you feel about the audience. And I sometimes, even being a digital marketer, I think, okay, if this goes viral, you're going to have to deal with, for lack of a better term, the internet troll world of people hating on you.
Yeah.
So like, I don't get offended anymore, but it's like for people whose personality maybe is not as domineering, sort of things like that, you have to take that into consideration. If you feel like it's going to really affect you in a negative way, then maybe it's not time.
Agreed.
Or maybe it's not time to share it on that platform. So
that's great. That's great advice. I love that.
Yeah.
Because people, I think there's so many levels that we wanted to approach with this. So I love this question. Would you be where you are today if you chose to not share your authentic story?
Definitely not. There's absolutely no question for me that, and it's funny because I feel like the Lord has challenged me even more to be, as I'm growing with him, to be more authentic. And it's amazing what doors have really opened, because I think there's a sensing, especially with us, we have the spiritual gifts of discernment. So sometimes people are picking up on things about you, even when you're not sharing them. I know I do it. I have a highly prophetic gift too. I can read and see things about people right when they walk in the room. So
I don't even want to know sometimes. And
I know. I do, because I'm like, okay, how can I pray for them? How can I help them? What kind of tools and resources? But I have the apostolic heart too, where I'm like, okay, everyone needs to be raised up in their gifts and sent out into the world. And so I think having that sense of discernment is like, okay, how can I really walk with them through this, or pray with someone through this, or be really aware. And in the times when I haven't shared my authentic self, or I just haven't maybe shared at all or whatever, it's like, it creates a little bit of a barrier. I've even seen it in my home group. Like they'll pick up on, because I have a really close group of friends that we do mentorship and things like that together. And they'll pick up on stuff and they're like, dude, what's up? Like we know some, or I'll sense them being distant. Not even intentionally, but I can tell if I'm not sharing sometimes my like real authentic heart about something, or just withholding, that it creates this distance. And for me, I don't want that. My heart is all about community. It's all about real relationships where we deal with the hard things together, and we're not afraid. We're not going to let the enemy come in and wreak havoc because we're afraid to share.
Totally. Awesome.
Yeah.
Gosh, this is so great. Time went by so fast. Well, tell us one more time about your free gift, because I want to make sure everybody gets.
Yeah. So I actually have a freebies page on my website where you can check out. There's 3 different offers on there for you, depending on where you are in your business. I always tell people when they're starting an online business or wherever you're at in your business, you need to focus on what you need right now. So if right now your heart is to write a book and get that started, then I have a free masterclass on how to write your book in 30 days. If you need to generate just more traffic onto your business, I have a free masterclass on generating traffic. And then if you just need some ideas for branding and kind of are getting your feet wet in the online marketing world, there's some freebies on there for that too. So wherever you're at, you can just log on, get some good information, and
Thanks so much, Lindsay. I really appreciate it.
Yes, Dawn, I just love you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad that we've developed such an awesome friendship. And it just is so encouraging for me to see the amazing people in the world that are just making tremendous changes and helping people love well and be loved well and grow and heal. It just makes my heart set on fire.
Yay. Well, have a great day, and I look forward to more.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.